I always felt really like I could never finish a project. I would start 100 different projects or 100 different things and never really be able to finish them, like never bring them to fruition. I've had, I can't even tell you my life. And in addition, every hobby I've ever had turned into a job, right? Like I loved yoga, so I became a yoga instructor. I loved to sew. So then I became I worked at a quilt shop and became a sewing instructor. I loved to lift weights, so I became a body pump instructor, right? Like I just everything I did turned into some sort of job.
Imagine waking up tomorrow and going after what you really, really want in life. I'm Melly, and you are listening to the interview podcast of me, where encouraging myself means inspiring everyone. I believe everyone has a unique gift meant to be lived. We all have the power to create the life we truly want, if we dare to pursue it. Choosing a career that doesn't fit you is like being trapped in a self-made cage. It's not just about finding a job. It's about discovering a path that fills your soul with joy and purpose. That's why I'm sharing stories from my personal heroes. People who followed a path that truly aligns with their passions and values, and it changed everything for them. I will also introduce you to mentors who will help you unlock your greatest potential. Thank you so much for being here. Women need other women in their lives to think that they're a big deal. Oh yes, ladies, we do. And I just found a really amazing one in Wisconsin. And I found her through the internet when I was looking for someone to teach me about scanner personalities. I found Katy Ripp, who now owns several businesses. She now started to coach people, women like me, multi-passionate, multi-talented, ambitious women, to help them create the life that they've always dreamed of. She was just such a joy to talk to. This has been an incredible conversation, and we had so much fun talking to each other and sharing stories, and I think you're really, really, really going to enjoy it.
I'm so curious how you found me.
I think purposely I was looking for scanner coaches.
Oh, interesting.
Scanner person.
Okay.
I actually, because I only just discovered that term recently. I mean, I knew about HSP, like highly sensitive people, and I heard about being, multi-passionate people. That's been, on my mind, and I'm like, okay. So I put myself into that category. And then I came across that scanner personality like a couple of times. And the other day I Googled it and I did some research, and then I came to your page, and I just like all the things you were saying. I'm like, oh my God, she understands me. She's talking to me.
I, of course, went to your site, right? Because when you don't know somebody, you're like, oh, I want to learn a little bit more about them. And I went to your site and I was like, oh, she's my people, right? Like there's only so many of us out here, I feel like. And when we connect, it's like, oh, hallelujah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And see, this is the, I think that's the amazing thing when you actually manage to be who you are, to be authentic, to, I don't even want to call it like to say like you're niching down into an area, but you pick an area that suits yourself, that suits your style, that suits your values, your goals. That's where you can help women, particularly in your case. And I just, it spoke so much to me, and I was like, oh, I've got to talk to her.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I am starting my own podcast too that launches in July. And so I was like, exciting. This is going to be amazing. I get to learn from somebody else. And so there is nothing I love more than connecting with truly value-driven, authentic people. There just is nothing more fulfilling for me. So thank you for reaching out. I can already even across the pond, I can already feel connection. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. I recently thought it's such a great idea because I'm, similarly to what you just
Yeah.
said, like I love connecting and meeting women, particularly that, where I don't know, like there's just something about it. And I really enjoy speaking to people that I can learn from and that, are on the same wavelength. And, now this gives me an excuse to contact them and reach out to random strangers.
Well, and the random strangers you're reaching out to are like also waiting for you. So like, it's such an amazing,
Yes.
I feel like I'm in this lovely tennis match of like lobbing high vibe back and forth right now. I just like, I'm in a really good place and I feel extremely blessed to be connected. And it's like one connection after the other, right? It kind of snowballs into this like, God, there's like all these amazing people out there. You forget how big the world is sometimes. Mm-hmm. And then how small it can be in a, in a Google world, right? Like you can connect with whoever you want.
Yes, I know. You just have to have the balls to contact them, I guess.
For sure. I mean, I think when you contacted me, I was like, of course, we all get spam, right? And I was like, is this real? Because I would be all over this. And so you kind of have to like, in the worlds of firewalls and spam filters, like the fact that it got through even, which is kind of amazing. So
yes,
I love it.
So that gives you a good feedback loop on, how you're doing a great SEO job. Working your website, getting up there.
I feel like I'm totally failing in that area, but this is, it's a good
I found
feedback.
You.
I'm so glad you did.
I think it's particularly though, because I was looking for the search term, most women that maybe your clients potentially, they might not necessarily look that up particularly. They look up the things, the issues that we have and how we function and the problems that we have, about finding our way. But how about you explain, like how you actually, like obviously you scanner personalities and ambitious coaching ambitious women is what you do. And that's your focus. And maybe you can share a little bit about your story and how you got to do it and why.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I love to hear myself talk, so it's fantastic. So I am a midlife, Midwestern USA, normal white girl. I don't know how else to say it. Like I'm just a normal person. Sometimes I feel like we get into situations where we don't really relate to people. And I always sort of felt like that. I've, since I was probably 14 or 15 years old, I've always been very like multi-passionate, like you said. But in a world where I didn't have a definition for it, it came down to, I always felt really, like I could never finish a project. I would start 100 different projects or 100 different things and never really be able to finish them, like never bring them to fruition. I've had, I can't even tell you my life. I've had 50 jobs probably in my lifetime. And I've always been a worker. Yeah.
You've been beating me. I counted them recently.
Yeah. So many jobs, but also I've always been a worker. So I very often had many jobs at the same time. And in addition, every hobby I've ever had turned into a job, right? Like I loved yoga. So I became a yoga instructor. I love to sew. So then I became I worked at a quilt shop and became a sewing instructor. I loved to lift weights. So I became a body pump instructor, right? Like I just everything I did turned into some sort of job. I think that's partly scanner personality. And I think it's partly just the way I grew up, right? Like we were just workers. That was just a work ethic thing. But in my world, I never really had like a yellow brick road. And I say that my dad used to say that to me. He's like, Katy, there's just no yellow brick road. Like, just keep walking until you find something. And I find that to be such a gift that he gave me now. At the time I was like, shut up. I didn't.
I was going to say, you never got criticized for it, or how was that received from your?
Not from him, because he's an entrepreneur too, and has always had lots of projects. But from everyone else, teachers, bosses, friends, family, right? Like I was always like I think there was, I'm sure I've been called lots of names, but like I was always kind of a hopper, like a job hopper. I could never really find my way. I ended up going into the military, into the Army National Guard when I was 22, because I just didn't know. I was sort of lost. I had 5 jobs by then. I never went to college. I don't have a degree. I have a certificate in web design, but like that was 1 year and that was about all I could stand in that kind of structure. I went into the military thinking like, this will give me a path. This, like, I will get the discipline I need. I will be able to finish this. I also have this trait of proving people wrong. So if somebody tells me I can't do something or it's like a huge challenge, I love to be like, oh no, actually I can. So it became, something that I thought was a good quality was not in the public, in like societal eyes. Unfortunately, I got to a point where I just wasn't really living authentically. And when you don't do that, you start to cope in ways that are the easiest way to cope. And for me, it was drinking. And so, what started out as like a pretty innocent way to drink alcohol, I always really sort of felt bad about it. Like I felt like I shouldn't be doing it. But as I got into my 20s, I got married, I had 2 kids. We both, my husband and I are both entrepreneurs. So I sold real estate. He has always done, blue collar, flooring, countertops, trades. So I kind of checked all the boxes. We moved and then moved back home, right where our family is. And I sort of job hopped around there. I didn't really have to work. I don't love that term at all. I didn't have to work because I depended on my husband for money. But it did not match who I was. I've always been a worker. So for me to be home and with my son, who was 6 weeks to 2 years at the time, it just didn't feel right. And when things don't feel right, we medicate, and I medicated with alcohol. So, it wasn't a problem until it became a problem, right? Like I was still functioning. I was just drinking too much for me. And that went on for decades, really. That went on until 3 years ago, or just about 3 years ago, I quit drinking. And
what do you think is like drinking too much? What would you say is too much?
Oh, sure. I'm totally, happy to share that. Some people don't like to share like how much they were drinking because it's a comparison thing. I don't really care. Socially, I started out drinking like everybody else would, right? Every other binge drinker would, let's just say that. Not everybody else. Like I didn't just have a glass of wine at dinner, right? Like when I was in my 20s, we would binge drink on the weekends, but then not drink during the week. Then in my 30s, it got to a point where I was drinking for sure I was drinking every day. Yeah. And then I was drinking like a bottle of wine every day.
That's why I'm asking. Yes. Yeah. Because I know
so it was a bottle of wine every.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
A bottle of wine every day. Right. Like it started out as 2 glasses and then it went to 3 and then it went to a bottle, and it was probably stated a bottle of wine for, but this is every day and then more on the weekends. And in the end, it was like a bottle and a half or 2 bottles a day. And it started to get to a point where I was drinking alone, right? Like there was never enough, or I didn't want to be judged by other people about how much I was drinking. So it was just easier to drink at home and alone. And so it just got ugly, right? My hangovers got really bad. I mean, I was still working. I owned businesses. We were really successful from the outside looking in. I was just doing it with a really horrible hangover every day. And like, I'm not proud of that, but it is something like, I think a lot of people just don't know what it's like to feel good. I felt like shit for ever. Oh, sorry. I swear. So is that okay?
Yes. With me, totally okay. I do the same.
I just felt like shit every day. It just, and the hangovers got worse. And then I was like downing, 1,600 milligrams of ibuprofen a day. And I'm in my 40s, right? Like I had gained 50 pounds. I had, stopped working out. I had started eating like shit. I couldn't sleep. It was just like this compounding effort of, like really making myself feel horrible. I mean, cause it was self-inflicted, but it was also self-medicating. I had tried to quit 1,000 different ways, 1,000 different times. I never hit a rock bottom, right? Like I didn't kill anybody. I never got a DUI. I never, I never hit my kids. It was just like I say a lot of times, like I was skipping along the bottom for a while. It was just like not who I was. That's the other thing. It's just like, it never felt good. So it never felt authentic. I had read a book called The Obstacle is the Way. And I remember thinking to myself at one point, or a number of points, like, I think this is my story. I think if I can get this thing licked, that this will like open up the doors for me for everything. And I just really believed that in my gut. And I finally listened. So on my husband's 40th birthday, again, not a huge, like nothing happened, right? We were drinking all day. I had thrown him a surprise party. So we had gone out golfing in the morning, drank all day, went to the surprise party. We were already full by the time we got to the party. And I had made 1,000 promises with myself over the years, right? Like, on special occasions, I'm not going to drink too much because I don't want to ruin it for everybody else. But of course, my like anxiety would get so bad, I'd need to calm it down. And that's what alcohol does, right? It's a depressant. So it's meant to do that. And so it got to a point at like 8:00 at night. It had been a super long day. And I was like, I had started removing myself from social functions, where I just like either got too drunk and I had to go home, or I just got like too tired and I was just like, I had hit my limit and I was done. And that night was one of them. And like the party was still going strong and I left at 8:00. I had somebody give me a ride home and I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I woke up the next day and I said, I'm done. Like this is never going, I knew in my heart that it was never going to get any better. It was only going to get worse. I was always going to wake up feeling bad and full of shame and anxiety. I was always like, I used to sit on the toilet and like put my head in my hands and just be like, why can I not do this? I can do everything else, but for some reason I can't do this. And I can't moderate. I'm like a very black and white person. And so the reason I go into that story is because I felt bad for the person I was. I felt bad for the inherent personality I was, which was doing a bunch of different things, right? Like being multi-passionate, being instead of it being celebrated, it was sort of like a personality flaw in society's eyes. And I just knew that I was like, that's what I was sort of medicating, was that I felt inherently and fundamentally wrong in some way. So when I finally quit drinking, I like sort of did, and I have done a lot of deep dives over my lifetime. I am very, like, I've always tried to fix myself in some way. To be medicated.
Because you try to find the fault with you as well, right? You're trying to
Right.
find
I was
a
constantly
way
trying
to make it work.
Right. I wanted to be right.
Yes.
I just wanted to
totally
be like everybody else.
Yes.
And I always felt abnormal, not like a black swan. Like I wasn't, I've always been like fairly charismatic and charming and like all the things that like society wants you to be as a like female, like fit into the right boxes, be the good girl, and I can do that because I'm fairly adaptable, but it never felt right. I never knew who I was. And you know, it's a progress, right? Like, or a process. It is. I still don't exactly know, but I'm way closer than I was. So over my lifetime, I have done acupuncture. I have done therapy. I have done meditation and yoga and Tai Chi and all of the alternative medicines, the practices, but even then I couldn't really like get into it. I would do it for a while and then, you know, drinking somehow got in the way of it. Excuse me. So I have also, and so, you know, all the self-help books, all the self-help podcasts, the documentaries, you know, if information was enough for me, I would be thin and rich. There's no doubt. I have read every single book about every single modality and self-helping mechanism there is. But of course we know like information isn't enough. You have to actually do as well. Yeah. So but in the end, I think that all of those years of doing that really did get me to a point when I finally quit drinking, all of those things started to work, right? Like the compounding education and knowledge I've built up over the years started to really like sink in once I cleared the path for myself. And then I found the scanner personality. I just don't know how to exactly quantify how that book, I went on a real deep rabbit hole hunt after I found that. I was like, there was a paragraph in there and I won't be able to, you know, quote it. But there was a paragraph in there basically like, yes, we've been called multi-passionate. Yes, we've been called like all these kind of like passive aggressive ways. But all of a sudden it was this scanner personality that like she celebrated it and was like this, like there's not that many of us out there. And we basically have the ability to rule the world. I mean, I don't know how it was so celebrated. And I finally felt like somebody saw me. And it was a book, right? Like it wasn't, she didn't actually see me, but it was like she spoke to me. And ever since then, it kind of comes and goes, right? Like, oh yeah, this is like that personality trait coming out. But once I started to celebrate it and I stopped medicating, like the world totally opened up for me. And this has been within let's say 5. I mean, within 5 years, I've opened 3 full-fledged businesses. I have over 50 employees. We have 2 commercial properties. Within the last 5 years.
Woohoo! That's amazing. Right? Congrats.
I know. And
look at that. It's like, wow.
Yeah. And I'm super proud of it. Right. Like because I think that there's a way to not be proud of that. Right. To feel like, oh, is this too much? Like I also get some passive aggressive. I don't know if they're passive aggressive. I don't think they're intentionally bad, but in one way or another, they become like comments like, I don't know how you have so much time in the day. I don't know how, how do you do it all? There's no, like, how do you have more hours in the day than the rest of us? I'm so amazed by how much you can get done. That sort of thing, where it still feels like kind of a jab. It's not meant to, I don't think, but it's still like, I think it still triggers me in a way that I'm different. And sometimes I don't want to be different, right? Like embracing it is still very much a daily struggle for me. Because I think it is so far removed from what society really expects from women in general, right? Like there's still a lot of women like, well, I wish I didn't have to work. Like, I just, no.
I was just thinking that. I'm like, oh my God. Like even when I stayed home, when I had my baby and the first 2 years, I loved being home, not like properly employed in the job, but I was doing things, you know? I always need to like keep my mind working and learn and study new things, explore new areas and topics. And I just love it. It's like your brain just goes, you know, it's like food for the brain or something. I don't know. And I love the excitement about it. You know, it just makes me go, ooh, it lights me up, you know? Yeah. And it's like, I can hear that when you talk too. Yeah.
I love it. And what I found was I made sort of a hobby out of opening businesses. Like I love
Maybe that's the way to look at it though. Maybe I should try that.
I love starting businesses. There's like nothing that lights me up more except for talking to other women like this, right? Like it's really like I love the creation part of it. I love the well, also what I realized when we opened our first, well, I've had a few businesses before I quit drinking, but we started a flower farm. I thought I was the only woman on earth starting a flower farm. That is not true. It was not my idea. But I thought to myself, like, this is going to be it. I'm going to like be a flower farmer. I'm going to do everything. I did it. I started it. I got it to a really like pinnacle spot. I did all the things. I loved it. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I am not a farmer, right? Like I am not a farmer. I hate bugs. So I don't like dirt. And what was happening is like, I ended up like crying over flowers, right? Like my tears would just come down over these flowers. And I was like, and I'm very into like energy and the law of attraction and manifesting stuff. And I was like, my tears cannot hit these flowers. They're going to kill them. Right. Like that's how I felt. I was like, if my tears hit these flowers, I'm going to kill them. And then these bouquets are going to go out and they're going to be dead. And that was sort of my sign that I was like, I'm not a farmer. I don't want to do this. And that was the first like acceptance that failure isn't really failure. For me, it was, I'm making a conscious decision that this is not for me. Even though I should, society says I should finish it. I should finish what I started. I should cry over flowers. It doesn't matter. Everybody hates their job. You're just at the pinnacle of this. You're just about to start making money. Why would you quit now? I mean, these are the thoughts going through my head, but also people are saying this to me, right? Like my husband was like, are you serious? We just invested all this money and now you realize that you're not a fucking farmer? And I'm like, yep, I did. I just realized I'm not a farmer. And so I closed it down. I was like, I had, in less than 2 years, I had 2,000 followers on our farm page. I had 80 clients that I was delivering flowers to. I mean, I could have really made it. I didn't want to. I just was like, I loved it for the time that it provided, but then I hated it. And I was like, I'm not spending my life like this. And I didn't want to cry over flowers. Yeah. They're my favorite thing on earth. I don't want to cry over flowers.
No, you want to enjoy them, right?
I don't want to hate flowers for my whole life. So farming is farming. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how cute or pretty they are. It's farming. So I'm not a farmer. Well, then we opened a wine bar. And again, I've basically turned all the things I love and my hobbies into jobs. So I love flowers. made a flower farm. I like to drink wine. I opened a wine bar, right? Like that's not lost on me that I've created that. Started that, thought I could do it all, right? Because I can. I was born with the I'll figure it out gene, right? Like all of us scanners are. We can just figure anything out. Like I can just make it work. I'm not scared of it. I just figure it out. And I did. I just figured out how to open a wine bar. I just did it. There's enough information out on the internet and you can just figure it out. And I did. However, I realized when you're an entrepreneur, you have to do a lot of things that are not just enjoying the guests that come in, right? Like that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to drink wine with people and like hang out at the tables. Except then it comes with staff and you have to pay bills and find insurance and, right? Like do all the things, all the marketing, all the everything. And I also realized, I'm actually not an operations manager. Right? Operations is not my deal. I'm not a detail person. I'm not an operations gal. And so I hired for it. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, I'm kind of good at hiring people. Like I found really good people and they all loved to work for me. So I was like, maybe this is what I'm good at. And then we bought a coffee shop, right? Like I love coffee. So I was like, oh yeah, right across the street, the woman that was selling or that had the like neighborhood coffee shop said I'm selling and we bought it. And I was like, this is great. This was right after the pandemic. And I was like, at this time I was sort of still I was still drinking too. So I was kind of filling the void of, well, it's sort of that like that self-fulfilling prophecy of everybody's telling me I can do it. That's the reward is like, how do you do all this stuff? And then you go out and do all the stuff because that's how you're rewarded. And so long story short, we ended up with the wine bar, with a coffee shop. We bought another building and we opened an ice cream shop. And then I quit drinking. And then
I heard there's good margins in ice cream.
It's great margin. Well, I'll tell you what, there's really good margin in coffee, ice cream, and alcohol.
I worked for an alcohol business. Yes, I know.
Yeah.
You picked the right ones.
They weren't stupid, right? Like they weren't dumb purchases or, business starting ventures. They were smart. And in the end, they have allowed me then, because I've hired really good people, I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, which I find to be like a scanner personality superpower, right? Like if you can figure out what you're good at, like I'm really good at starting things. I know I'm not an operations person, but when you have brick and mortar places, you have to have operational people. You have to have people that are willing to do the laundry every single day. And by that, I mean, making orders, right? Like we need to order milk every week. Well, I was in charge of that for 2 weeks. And then I forgot the third week. And I was like, I can't. I mean, and we go through 50 gallons of milk a week. So like when you don't have 50 gallons at a coffee shop, it's a problem. So I just started figuring out, and at this point I had quit drinking, and I started like really drilling down into what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. And I started hiring really good people for what I wasn't good at. And I admitted it. I was just like, listen, I'm not an operations person. It's okay for me to not be an operations person. And it's actually a good idea that I'm not, right? Like I know my weaknesses. My staff knows my weaknesses and they fill in the blank for me.
Perfect. Yeah.
But when you start living, so what I really did was start living authentically. I started living by what my real values were, not what somebody else told me they should be. I started setting really significant hard boundaries. I took my extroverted...
In what way? Yeah, when you say
the boundaries.
In what way did you set them?
Well, I started leaving parties that weren't like, I just didn't feel good at. I was like, I'm done here. Right. Like when I was done, I was done. And that was more of like a protection of my sobriety. I started saying no to a lot of things, like just no. I don't need an excuse. I don't need to prove anything. I don't need to lie. I just don't want to go. And so I just didn't go. When I wanted to go work out, I went and worked out. When I wanted to, or when I needed help with the kids from my husband, I would ask. When I wanted something from my husband, I would ask. I like stopped with the mind reading. One of the things that I always felt was I needed to be a producer. I needed to be working all the time. And if I wasn't working or I didn't have the perception that I was working, I would feel really guilty. And I stopped doing that. And I'll tell you why I stopped it. I went to a therapist once and she said, I was talking about feeling guilty about not working, like ever taking a day off, ever feeling like I could step out of work mode. And I said, well, I don't really think that makes me a bad person. And she said, well, as a boss, it does make you a bad person because what you're modeling to your staff is that they can never take a day off. And I was like, oh, shit. And so all of a sudden I was like, if I want, and one of my like pinnacle goals as a boss is like, self-care is the most important thing. We cannot fill from an empty cup. We cannot, right? Like all of these cliches that are out there about self-care. Yeah. And that has stuck with me forever. And that boundary, I put up that boundary that when I don't work, I don't work. And my staff knows it, which means that they can also have the permission to take off because I show them that it's okay. I show them that we're not working ourselves to the bone. We're taking care of ourselves first. And this is just a job. My quote or motto is we're not saving babies. We're serving wine, coffee, and ice cream. If we have to, shut the fucking doors. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And so sort of putting stuff into perspective. So those sort of boundaries, I think when people hear boundaries, they're like, oh, this person can't come beyond that. Right? You draw a hard line and it's usually with people. I had to set some like major boundaries for myself. If I feel like going for a walk, I go for a walk. I don't think about it. I don't like spin about what do I have to do later? Or what, like, why am I going for a walk? Or what is this doing for me? Or like, what goal is this going to reach? It's just that I like, as part of my job, I get my best ideas when I walk. So, or when I'm out in nature or whatever. So I have to have that for my job. So it's just part of my job now. Like walking is just part of my job. And that was the other thing I didn't know about scanners is either in silence or in movement and many times in nature is when we get our best ideas. I get them on the treadmill. I get them when I'm doing yoga.
Me too.
You should. Yeah.
Running. So, I get them when I'm running.
Me too. So like when I always felt sort of bad that I wasn't in the moment when I was practicing yoga in a class. Except that's when all my best ideas would come, right? Like I'd be the one on my phone, like making notes in Savasana, right? Like, cause I was like, I got this idea. I can't forget it.
Like I stopped my run. I stopped my run in between. Yes. I'm like listening to a podcast going, oh my God, I just had this idea. I have to stop and just quickly note it down and then I can keep running.
And when in my younger years, I didn't have to write it down. Now I have to write everything down. Yeah. So it's been quite a journey. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Hey, and thanks for tuning in today. I hope you have enjoyed this episode as much as I did. And if you did, I would be super, super grateful if you could leave me a review. It really helps me to inspire more listeners to follow their own path. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn. And if you are ready to take your next step to work-life happiness, I would be thrilled to help. You find all links in the show notes below. See you next time, and thanks for being part of Emmy.